What is up guys, Dzeeff here. Today I want to talk about 5 common mistakes that might be costing you duels. A lot of people are getting back into the game now that locals have opened up again, and a lot of people picked up Yu-Gi-Oh! Over quarantine and now they're going to their first locals. So I thought I would make this video to help out those types of players, but actually I feel like this video could help all sorts of players because I think nobody out there plays perfectly every single match. This video is not about laughing at people that make these mistakes. This video is all about improving as a player if that's what you're trying to do. Maybe it's not about getting a top at a big tournament, but if you're just struggling to do well at locals, I'm pretty sure that these tips are going to help you out. If at least one tip in today's video helps you out, make sure to give this video a like and let me know in the comment section which tip you found most helpful. Anyway, without further ado, let's talk about 5 common ways you might be throwing away wins. First up, playing into impermanence columns. Infinite impermanence is a very commonly played hand trap that also has a bonus ability while on the board. It says target one face-up monster your opponent controls, negate its effects until the end of this turn, then if this card was set before activation and is on the field at resolution, for the rest of this turn all other spell and trap effects in this column are negated. If you control no cards, you can activate this card from your hand. Now when I say avoid playing into the infinite impermanence column, a lot of you guys probably thought of the very common misplay where one player activates a set impermanence and then the other player later on in that turn activates a spell or trap card in that column, which then makes it so the effect of that new spell or trap card is negated because it was activated in the column that infinite impermanence was set. Now don't get me wrong, that is a very common misplay and you should avoid it at all costs, but also infinite impermanence has another misplay that a lot of people don't talk about, which is basically when your opponent has back row cards but they don't have 5 back row cards, make sure you don't play your spell and trap cards in the same column as your opponent's back row. I have seen this over and over again, and honestly I've gotten wins because my opponent made this misplay. If your opponent has like 3-4 back row cards but they still have one column open, play your spell and trap cards in that open column so that they can't chain infinite impermanence on one of your monsters to negate your spell or trap card. That definitely is a misplay that I see a ton of players make, maybe even more so than playing a card in a column where infinite impermanence resolved after it was set. Infinite impermanence has been a very popular card for a few years now, so make sure you're really paying attention to which columns you activate your spell and trap cards in. Next up, try to avoid side decking going second cards when you're going first, and then also try to avoid siding going first cards when you're going second. Now this can be a bit tricky because a lot of the time your opponent will be the one choosing who goes first or second, but you can make an educated guess and probably say, okay, my opponent is playing a combo deck, I won game 1, I saw what they were playing, they're probably going to go first in game 2, and then you should side deck accordingly. This is especially true if you're the one that gets to choose who's going first in the next game. Why are you side decking into evenly matched if you know you're going first? That's a card you basically will never be able to use because assuming you set up a board of even one card, the evenly matched is a very awkward card to get value out of. That's not to say that you'll automatically lose if you side deck a card like evenly matched when you're going first. You might even get a funny win off of it, but in general it's not the most consistent option. Now sure, sometimes there are reasons to side deck going second cards when you're going first. For example, if I'm playing against a Mystic Mind deck, yeah, I'm gonna keep Harpy's Feather Duster in my deck even if I go first, just because I want more outs to Mystic Mind. But just in general, I have seen at a number of tournaments over the years, people draw really awkward opening hands in game 2 when they're going first, and they chose to go first, where they draw multiple going second cards cards, and I have to ask myself, well, why did they even bother side decking those cards in? That doesn't make a lot of sense. So yeah, while everything does have its exceptions, and there are cases where side decking going second cards when you think you're going first can be valuable, I would advise against it because oftentimes it can just make your hands a lot brickier. In fact, this is why sometimes you'll see people bait their opponents into thinking they're going second, but then they actually make them go first just so that they draw a bunch of going second cards and they're unable to combo off. So keep that in mind when you are playing your decks. Make sure you're not side decking cards that are only good going second when you know you're going first. Next up, and I know I've mentioned this one in past videos, but I feel it is one of the most important tips, especially at locals. Make sure your opponent has paid their cost to make sure they have selected their targets before you respond to their cards. You have no idea how many times I've seen someone activate Twin Twisters and their opponent immediately flips up back row before the other player has even discarded a card or targeted the cards that they want to destroy. Keep in mind here, this is not only because this is a rule where your opponent has to pay their cost before you're able to respond, but also it's for strategic reasons. You don't want to give away any information to your opponent before they've decided on their targets, before they've decided on their cost. This isn't only a Twin Twisters problem. I see this come up all the time, and I really think people are throwing away wins. So make sure when your opponent activates a card effect, they pay their cost, they do their targets, they do all that stuff before you respond with any of your cards. Next up, if your locals has a round timer, make sure you keep track of it. This is a good general tip for any tournament. Back when we had bigger in-person events, those ones would always have clocks, of course, but I know not every locals does that. If it doesn't, maybe they do like a 10-minute warning or a 5-minute warning before the round is about to end, but just in general, try to be aware of how much time there is left in the round. The current end of match procedures are pretty rough if you kind of get surprised by them, so you really want to be paying attention to make sure you don't go into time. There are a bunch of ways to avoid going into time: playing faster, making sure you understand your deck before you go to a tournament, but one of the ones that I like to mention, because people always laugh at me when I do it, but I usually don't go into time, and I think this plays a big role, is that I scoop games that I know I can't win. People always get mad at me, especially when I'm playing online, that I scoop games way too early, as they say, but I do that because it saves a lot of time. If I'm going second with a trap deck like Altergeist, I'm probably not going to beat a full Drytron combo board. So if my opponent starts comboing off and I look at my hand and go, okay, I have no hand traps, I have no board breaking cards, I just scoop that game to go to the next one. You should probably know what your deck is capable of doing when going second against big boards. Do you have hand traps? Do you have cards like Kaijus or Forbidden Droplet in the main deck? Because if you don't draw those hand traps and you don't have Kaijus or Forbidden Droplet, which could be cards you could draw into to break the board, why are you sitting there watching your opponent combo off when you know you can't win? Now, like all of these tips, there are exceptions here. For example, if your opponent seems unfamiliar with their deck, maybe you might guess that they're going to mess up the combo. That would be a reason to not scoop super early. Like I said already, if you have cards that can break boards going second, that's a reason to not scoop early. Or if your deck in general is just a bigger combo deck that can break their board while still comboing off, those are all great reasons to not scoop early. But if you know your deck cannot break the Herald of Perfection with 4 negates plus the IP Masquerena, don't let your opponent sit there and combo off for 10 minutes. You are just wasting time. Also, I probably shouldn't have to mention this, but you don't have to scoop to save time when you're in game 3. Obviously, if it is the last game of the match, you might as well play it out just in case your opponent messes up, even if they are a very good player. I'm mostly talking about scooping early in games 1 or 2, just so that you have enough time to finish the match. And also, just make sure that you are playing at a good pace. Yeah, one person might ask you to play faster when you are playing at a perfectly acceptable pace, but if it happens week after week where pretty much all of your opponents are asking you to play faster, that might mean that you need a bit more practice to really get ready for a tournament. Don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with being a newer player and playing a bit slow, but if it becomes a recurring problem, you'll really want to make sure that you address that as you continue playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Especially when big tournaments open up and judges are a lot harsher about slow playing, it's just good to get in the habit of playing at a good pace. People always assume I go into time a lot because I play slower control decks like Altergeist and Paleozoics, but the truth is I rarely go into time. I play at a really good pace in my opinion, but also I scoop those games that I know I can't win, which does save a lot of time in the match. Remember, in Yu-Gi-Oh!, unlike a few other card games, the individual games don't matter in a match. All that matters is who won the best 2 out of 3. So just in general, I would advise paying attention to the clock and making sure you are doing everything possible to not go into time. Finally, try to look up any weird rulings that your deck might have, especially if your deck is newer or especially if your deck is lesser known. You want to make sure that you understand not only your combos like I mentioned earlier, but you also want to understand your rulings. Not every Yu-Gi-Oh! Card is the same. There are a lot of very specific rulings in this game, so you want to make sure that you understand the basic and not so basic rulings of whatever deck you're playing at a tournament. You might not know your opponent's deck at a tournament, but at the very least you should know your deck quite a bit, not only with those combos, but also with the rulings that your cards might have. This is especially important, like I said, if you are playing a deck that people are unfamiliar with, either because it's brand new or because it is a lesser known strategy. So really make sure you know your rulings so that when a question comes up in a match, you are pretty confident when you answer. Of course, if you get confused about a ruling, even with your own cards, make sure you call a judge over to help out. I am aware a lot of locals don't have judges, but if yours does, make sure to use them if you have any questions. Anyway, that is all for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Like I said, let me know in the comment section below which tip helped you out the most, which one of these things were you doing that maybe you can improve upon in the future. Remember, no one plays perfectly, there's always room to improve, but I hope that these tips were able to help you guys out. I'll see you later. Thanks so much for watching. Goodbye.